Have you ever walked into a space without uttering a single word, yet somehow felt that everyone noticed you? Not because of your physique, not due to your clothing, but because of your aura. That strange feeling of being completely whole while simultaneously untouchable. This sensation doesn't originate externally. It doesn't emerge from mirrors, lipstick, or perfectly styled hair. It springs from within, and what's most fascinating is that you don't need to force anything. You simply need to remember who you truly are. This video isn't about magical formulas or strategies for winning someone over. It's about something far more powerful. The quiet energy that radiates from a woman when she honors herself, and how this self-respect transforms everything, including the way others perceive her. Jung once said that what we don't resolve internally ends up projecting into our relationships. That's why some women spend their entire lives trying to earn respect, but don't realize they're begging for it through behaviors that don't align with their authentic selves. This video serves as a reminder that you don't need to ask for respect. You simply need to stop abandoning yourself. When this happens, a different force awakens. A mature, present woman who doesn't shout but silently transforms the atmosphere of an entire room. Let's discuss these 5 silent postures that create this almost invisible yet absolutely real magnetism. Before we begin with the first one, let me ask you something. If this topic has resonated somewhere deep within you, consider subscribing to this channel and liking this video. Not just because it helps, but because these are the types of conversations we need more of. Conversations that don't teach tricks, but activate memories. Conversations that help us remember where our strength originated. Now let's move to the first silent posture. She listens to herself before responding. This might seem simple, but it changes everything. A woman who listens to herself doesn't react hastily. She breathes, feels, and only then responds. It's not about being cold or remaining silent. It's about becoming a complete space before turning into a reaction. You know that habit of constantly justifying yourself, explaining that you didn't mean to offend, that you were just tired, that it wasn't quite like that. This woman begins to realize that often the world is trying to invade a place where she herself hadn't even arrived yet. She learns to protect this place with silence. Not passive silence, but present silence. It's as if she's saying with her eyes, "I'm here, but I no longer lose myself to please anyone." This type of presence has a strange effect. It frightens those accustomed to shouting and anxiety and attracts those with the maturity to remain where there's depth. More than that, she realizes she doesn't need to be quick to be strong, doesn't need to answer everything to assert herself, because what she feels is more important than what others expect from her. This doesn't make her selfish. It makes her lucid, whole, impossible to manipulate through emotional haste. Have you noticed that when a woman acts this way, she becomes different? She doesn't have that vibration of someone seeking approval. She simply is. That's precisely why she awakens curiosity, respect, desire, but a different kind of desire. Not the consuming kind, but the contemplative kind. And that's when everything changes, because the woman who listens to herself above all else is alive within her own body. She feels emotions arriving, but doesn't deliver them carelessly. She chooses how she wants to respond to life. This choice, made in silence, changes everything. If you've ever experienced this moment of listening to yourself, even if it was just once, you know how powerful it is. It's as if the entire world stopped for a second, and you remembered, "I'm not here to please anyone, I'm here to be authentic." This is the first posture, and it already transforms how others see you, but most importantly, it transforms how you see yourself. In the upcoming segments, we'll explore the other postures, the one that makes a woman stop explaining herself, the one that changes her presence in a relationship, and the one that transforms silence into real power. But everything begins here, with the silence that reconnects you to yourself. Posture 2. She stops explaining herself constantly. There comes a time in every woman's life when she grows tired of having to justify herself, of having to explain why she feels too much or why she no longer wants certain things, or simply for changing. Have you experienced this? That sensation that if you don't explain every detail of what you do, someone will think you're wrong, selfish or cold. It's as if the world had said from early on that you needed to be always available, always clear, always kind. But then something shifts when a woman matures emotionally. She understands that not everyone deserves access to her explanation. Not everything needs to be translated for those who don't truly want to listen. She begins to perceive that whoever demands excessive justification actually doesn't want to understand. They want to control, to extract a version that makes them comfortable to accept. And in that moment, she lets go. She doesn't fight, doesn't argue back. She simply lets it be. This is one of the most powerful postures because it shows that the woman trusts her own path even when others disagree. She doesn't try to convince. She simply continues. And this, for many people, is unbearable because it forces the other to deal with their own emptiness, with the fact that this woman will no longer diminish herself to fit into shallow relationships. The most beautiful part is that this woman begins to feel light, not because life became easy, but because she stopped carrying the weights that others threw on her shoulders. She understands that not every why needs an answer, and that often silence is the most honest response she can give. This is self-respect, and this respect is magnetic. It transforms the way she moves through the world. She no longer enters useless debates. She no longer proves anything. She lives, simple as that, and paradoxically, that's when she becomes magnetic, because the woman who doesn't justify herself transmits the message, I'm not here to explain myself, I'm here to live myself. And few things are more attractive than that, because that is truth, and truth has its own brilliance. Posture 3. She withdraws instead of begging. This might hurt a little, but it's liberating. How many times have you stayed in places that wounded you just because you wanted to be seen? How many times did you insist on conversations, gestures, proof, hoping that someone would finally realize what they had in their hands? Jung said that the wound is the place where light enters, and many women only learn this third posture after bleeding a few times. But when they learn, when they rise and understand that staying where there's no reciprocity is a form of self-betrayal, they change. They don't make scenes, don't dramatize, don't send long WhatsApp messages. They simply withdraw. But it's not an escape. It's a movement of respect. The woman who matures understands that self-love doesn't shout. It whispers. And the whisper says, not here. She begins to see that begging for respect is like offering gold to someone who only sees mud. And that's exhausting. Exhausting because her soul already understood everything, but her ego still insists on winning something there. But the day comes when even the ego can't take it anymore, and she rises, not to make a scandal, but to care for what remains of herself. This movement has immense power because it changes the woman's frequency. She leaves scarcity and returns to presence. She realizes she doesn't need to conquer a place in anyone's heart, because the heart that belongs to her will already have its door open. And ironically, when this woman withdraws, when she stops begging for attention, for responses, for crumbs, she becomes the one nobody forgets, because she didn't try to convince. She simply showed through absence how much her presence was worth. This posture also isn't learned through formulas. It's born from the exhaustion of a soul tired of giving where nobody watered back. And when she understands this, she stops expecting flowers from those who only have stones. She continues whole, in silence, but each step carries a message that doesn't need to be said. I chose myself. And this isn't pride, it's healing. It's as if she finally stopped confusing love with effort and understood that whoever truly wants to stay does so not through insistence, but through harmony. These two postures, stopping the explanations and knowing when to withdraw, profoundly change how a woman is perceived, because she begins to vibrate at a different frequency. She leaves the position of proving and enters the posture of presence. In the next segments, we'll touch on two more, even more transformative postures, one that completely changes how to experience a relationship and one that transforms pain into magnetism. If any part of this text made you breathe differently, if something here touched you even lightly, stay with me until the end, because what follows might be what you needed to hear for years. Posture 4. She loves without losing herself. One of the greatest confusions many women experience is believing that loving someone means forgetting themselves. And it's not your fault. From very early on, many women learned that true love was synonymous with total surrender, with putting themselves second, with always prioritizing the other, even if it cost their emotional health. But time, pain, and silence teach something else. They teach that the most beautiful love isn't the one that makes you forget who you are. It's the one that allows you to be even more yourself near the other. Jung spoke about individualization, the process of becoming who you are despite all external pressures. And when a woman goes through this process, she learns to love without disappearing. She doesn't cancel herself out, doesn't make the other the center of her universe. She shares, but doesn't hand over the keys to her own soul on a silver platter, because she understood that true love only exists between two complete beings, two who choose to walk together not out of necessity, but out of truth. At this point, love becomes a daily choice, not an emotional addiction. She stops confusing attachment with connection. She realizes that if something requires her to change her essence to be accepted, then that was never love. And as much as it hurts, she won't abandon herself to keep anyone around. This woman might cry, might feel afraid of losing, but she won't beg because she already understood that who she is worth more than any company. She doesn't need to hide to be loved, doesn't need to mold herself to fit. She offers herself completely, but doesn't dissolve. And this, again, has enormous impact because her love doesn't suffocate, doesn't pressure, doesn't demand, but also doesn't accept less than truth. She doesn't romanticize coldness, doesn't justify disrespect, and doesn't tolerate emotional absence as if it were normal. She loves in a way that heals, but only remains where love also sustains her. This is freedom, emotional maturity, magnetism. It's the type of woman who doesn't depend on another's love, but still awakens the best in whoever is beside her, because she doesn't carry the other. She walks together, hand in hand, but with both feet firmly planted on her own ground. Posture 5. She transforms pain into presence. There are pains you'll never be able to explain, moments that nobody saw, and yet they shaped you. Every woman carries a story within her chest, invisible scars that told her who she needed to be to survive. But at some point in the journey, this woman looks at all of this and understands. I am not the pain, but I am what was born after it. This is the last and perhaps most sacred of the silent postures, the woman who transforms pain into presence. She doesn't pretend she didn't suffer, doesn't hide what she lived, but she doesn't allow that to define who she is. She made peace with the past, not because it was easy, but because she understood that carrying resentment is like drinking poison every day, expecting the other to feel something. She stopped unconsciously seeking revenge, stopped looking for reparation in loves that had nothing to do with ancient wounds. She simply healed, and the healing wasn't on a magical day, didn't have background music. It was in silence, in the early morning, in the solitude that hurt but taught. It was there that she learned to stay with herself, there that she discovered something stronger than the fear of being alone, the peace of being whole. And this woman who healed didn't become a perfect version of herself. She still feels, still gets emotional, but now she knows nothing, and nobody has the power to take her away from herself. She carries a different light in her gaze, not because she never fell, but because she rose every time with more truth than before. And when she enters a place, she doesn't need to speak loudly. Her silence says everything. I survived, and now I truly live. This type of presence is magnetic because it doesn't try anything, doesn't force anything. It simply is. That's why it's remembered, respected, desired, but more than anything, it's free. These are the 5 postures that Jung might have called attitudes of the soul. Silent, profound, and transformative. They're not techniques, not seduction tricks. They're ways of being in the world when a woman has already understood that she doesn't need to be accepted to exist. She has already accepted herself, and that changes everything. If these words touched some part of you, share this video with someone who needs to remember their own strength. Leave a comment saying, "I choose myself." And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment, because here we don't talk about fleeting beauty. We talk about presence that stays. And every woman deserves to see herself this way, whole, strong, and impossible to ignore. When a woman experiences what we've called here the silent attitudes, it's not just her behavior that transforms, it's her frequency. Something within her becomes unreachable to those who don't resonate with the same truth. And this gradually clears her path. She can no longer maintain friendships where she's the only one listening. She can no longer tolerate being in a relationship where she must diminish herself to fit. She no longer feels the urge to respond to every attack as she once did. She doesn't want to fight anymore, but she also won't remain silent where injustice exists. What changes is her intention. Now she speaks because she's aligned with her own soul, not because she wants to prove something to someone. The most intriguing aspect is that she loses the need for revenge, for playing games, for seeking approval. She no longer wants to win. She wants to find peace. When this type of woman emerges, the world finds it strange because she isn't loud, but she is firm. She can say no with a calm tone, and you feel that this no is final. She can look into someone's eyes and say what no one else had the courage to say before, without raising her voice, without attacking, simply with truth. This is rare, and everything rare either frightens or attracts. But there's more. This woman isn't just someone who has matured internally. She also activates this process in others, especially in men. A man who has never had to take responsibility for his actions might feel uncomfortable around her because her silence demands more than 1,000 speeches. She doesn't need to say, "I expected more from you." The way she leaves, without drama, but with dignity, is enough. This type of farewell has a bitter taste because it carries a mirror. She has become the woman who is no longer deceived by shallow promises, beautiful words, or emotional excuses disguised as affection. It's not that she's become cold. It's that now she listens to herself before embracing others. She filters, she feels what resonates and what no longer fits. This internal radar is impossible to turn off. Jung said that no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making their own darkness conscious. It was precisely this process that made this woman grow. She looked within, saw her shadows, forgave herself for the time she stayed too long where she wasn't loved, and decided that from then on, she would choose differently. This is the key. She doesn't seek revenge, she selects. Not out of arrogance, but because she understands that her own energy is sacred and will no longer be wasted. There's something almost magical about this. She begins to be treated differently, not because she became someone unreachable or mysterious, but because she emanates clarity. Clarity frightens those who live in confusion, but enchants those who have the maturity to truly see. She doesn't seduce, she reveals. What she reveals is so authentic, so complete, so light, that respect comes without her needing to ask for it. Desire comes without her needing to provoke it. Because what is true has its own brilliance, and those who look with the right eyes can see it. This woman has learned that she can still be sweet, kind, affectionate, but never again manipulable. This is where the silent strength that Jung spoke of so much resides, the strength of those who know themselves. Those who know themselves aren't easily deceived. Those who know themselves recognize when something isn't in harmony. Those who know themselves don't trade peace for presence. She prefers to be alone and whole, rather than accompanied and empty. It's not that she doesn't feel pain anymore. She does, but now she feels it with awareness. Pain, when accepted with maturity, doesn't wound the same place twice. This woman is dangerous for those who live by emotional control because she doesn't waver with blackmail. She doesn't respond to manipulation. She doesn't dance to the rhythm of others' neediness. She simply exists in peace, in her time, in her space, and this calm, firm existence transforms everything around her. She doesn't want to conquer the world. She wants to live with truth, and that alone makes her a walking revolution. The fifth posture, transforming pain into presence. She transforms pain into presence. There are pains you'll never be able to explain, moments no one witnessed, yet they still shaped you. Every woman carries a story within her chest, invisible scars that told her who she needed to be to survive. But at some point in her journey, this woman looks at all of this and understands, I am not the pain, but I am what was born after it. This is the last and perhaps most sacred of the silent attitudes, the woman who transforms pain into presence. She doesn't pretend she hasn't suffered. She doesn't hide what she's lived through, but she doesn't allow it to define who she is. She made peace with the past, not because it was easy, but because she understood that carrying resentment is like drinking poison every day, expecting the other person to feel something. She stopped unconsciously seeking revenge, stopped looking for reparation in loves that had nothing to do with old wounds. She simply healed. The healing didn't happen in one magical day. It didn't have background music. It was in the silence, in the early morning hours, in the solitude that hurt but taught. It was there she learned to stay with herself. It was there she discovered that there's something stronger than the fear of being alone, the peace of being whole. This woman who healed didn't become a perfect version of herself. She still feels, still gets emotional, but now she knows that nothing and no one has the power to take her away from herself. She carries a different light in her eyes, not because she never fell, but because she got up every time with more truth than before. When she enters a place, she doesn't need to speak loudly. Her silence says everything. I survived, and now I truly live. This type of presence is magnetic because it doesn't try anything, doesn't force anything. She simply is. That's why she's remembered, respected, desired, but more than anything, she's free. There comes a time when everything falls into place, not because the world changed, but because she finally changed how she inhabits her own world. The woman who lives these 5 silent attitudes, who listens to herself before responding, who stops explaining herself, who withdraws instead of begging, who loves without losing herself, and who transforms pain into presence. She no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. She has returned home, and home is herself. Jung said that the true encounter with the soul only happens when we stop running from pain and start listening to what it's trying to tell us. This woman listened. She went through chaos, yes, but she didn't stay there. She used chaos as a portal and crossed through, sometimes with fear, sometimes with tears, but she crossed. Upon emerging on the other side, she realized that what she most sought wasn't love from others. It was reconnection with herself. Because when she finds herself, everything changes. Love changes, relationships change, the way she enters a room changes. It's no longer about how others look at her. It's about how she sees herself. This new vision reflects in her body, in her tone of voice, in her energy. The woman who truly respects herself attracts respect, not for what she wears, but for what she vibrates. She has become a field, and this field says, if you're here to add, come. If you're here to drain, don't even approach. But attention, this woman doesn't live isolated with her chest armored. She hasn't turned to stone. On the contrary, she's lighter, softer, more present than ever. She just doesn't hand over her heart on any tray anymore. She learned that love worth having is built with truth, not haste. That respecting her own time is an act of emotional intelligence. That no one is obligated to understand her, but she is obligated to never abandon herself again. There's something beautiful in all of this. This woman begins to inspire others without preaching, without teaching, just by being. She walks differently, looks into eyes with firmness and sweetness simultaneously. She doesn't need an audience, but she also doesn't hide. She is the woman her previous version thought she could never become, and she got here not through perfection, but through persistence, through the courage to fall 1,000 times and get up 1,001. She stopped betraying herself for affection, stopped accepting emotional crumbs, and understood that what she has is rare. And what is rare isn't given to just anyone. This woman is desired, yes, but above all, she is respected because people feel they're in the presence of someone who carries depth, who isn't interested in games, who doesn't chase but also doesn't hide. She looks, feels, chooses with calm, with clarity, with courage. For you who have made it this far, perhaps this woman is already awakening within you. Perhaps you've already lived some of these attitudes. Perhaps you're in the middle of the journey. Or perhaps you're still trapped in old pains, thinking you need to mold yourself to be loved. Whatever point you're at, let me remind you, you already have everything you need. What's missing isn't beauty or youth or answers. What's missing is simply remembering. Remembering who you were before you got lost in others' eyes, before trying to fit, before confusing love with effort. The woman you want to be is already there, perhaps tired, perhaps suffocated, but alive and ready to awaken. When she stops shouting for love and begins to whisper her own truth, the whole world needs to listen. And those who don't respect it will feel the absence, because a woman who has chosen herself never returns to the place where she got lost.